"I am ready," she whispered, her voice steady, though her heart trembled. "Do what you must." Obaro stepped forward, his golden eyes gleaming. "This will not be easy. The cost of restoring the balance is great, and your spirit will be bound to the world of the spirits. You will never return to the living." The weight of his words settled over her like a shroud, but Nneka held her head high. "I accept my fate," she said. With that, the spirit raised his staff, and the air around them crackled with energy. A storm of wind and lightning swirled in the chamber, and the ground beneath them trembled. Nneka felt herself lifted off the ground, her body surrounded by a blinding light. Her heart pounded in her chest as the spirit's power flowed through her. The walls of the chamber seemed to bend and warp, and the air was thick with an unnatural force. Nneka closed her eyes, bracing for what was to come. In that moment, she felt a strange sense of peace. The weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders, and she realized that this was her destiny. She had always known that she was meant for something greater than herself. This sacrifice, painful as it was, would be her legacy. And as the light enveloped her, Nneka felt herself fade from the world of the living, her spirit now bound to the realm of the ancestors. When the storm finally subsided, the villagers stood in stunned silence. The air was still, the oppressive weight of the curse gone. The winds had calmed, and the skies above were clear for the first time in months. Okoi, his face grim, stood at the heart of the village square. He knew that Nneka had made the ultimate sacrifice. She'd given everything for the village, for the people she loved. As the villagers gathered, there was a sense of quiet awe. They could feel that something had changed. The land, once burdened by the curse, now seemed to breathe with life. The crops flourished, and animals returned to the village. It was as though the very essence of the village had been reborn. But as the days passed, Okoi could not shake the feeling that something still lingered in the air. Nneka's spirit had indeed been taken by the spirits to restore balance, but the cost had been immense. He wondered what kind of peace would follow a sacrifice so great. One evening, as the village settled into a new rhythm, a strange presence swept through the air. The villagers, who had been enjoying the peace they had not known in years, suddenly felt an eerie chill. A low hum, almost like a song, reverberated through the trees surrounding the village. Okoi, sensing the disturbance, went to the edge of the village to investigate. He was met by a figure cloaked in light, its face glowing softly. It was Nneka's spirit, her form both ethereal and beautiful, her eyes filled with sorrow yet peace. "Nneka!" Okoi exclaimed, his voice breaking. "You are here, but how we thought—" Nneka's spirit smiled gently, her presence soothing. "I am here, Okoi, but not as I once was. My spirit remains bound to the balance I restored, but the peace I sought has come at a price. The curse is truly lifted, but the world between the living and the dead is fragile. It must always be guarded." Okoi's heart ached as he realized the truth. Nneka had not truly left. She was the guardian now, bound to watch over the village for as long as the balance held. The villagers, though unaware of her sacrifice, would live in peace, knowing that their protector watched over them. "You will never be forgotten," Okoi whispered, his voice filled with reverence. "Your legacy will live on in all of us." And with that, Nneka's spirit faded into the night, her essence woven into the very fabric of the village, a guardian for all time. The days following Nneka's sacrifice were quiet, yet there was an unspoken understanding that something extraordinary had taken place. The village flourished under the protection of the spirits, but Okoi could never shake the feeling that Nneka's presence still lingered. He had seen her spirit with his own eyes, and though she was gone from the living world, it felt as though she was watching over them from afar. As the village grew stronger, there were those who began to whisper about the protection they had received. They spoke of dreams in which Nneka appeared, guiding them through trials, offering words of wisdom, and even leading them in their fields, ensuring crops flourished as they never had before. The village was prosperous, but Okoye knew there would always be a cost. Spirits could not be tethered to the mortal world forever. One night, Okoye stood alone at the village's edge, gazing out at the moonlit horizon. He could feel the energy of the land around him, wild and unpredictable, but undeniably alive. The village was at peace, but deep within, he sensed that the balance could be shattered at any moment. No peace, no matter how hard won, could be permanent without vigilance. He reached out into the stillness, as if hoping for an answer. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of a shadow, a figure clothed in the night. It was a tall man, his face hidden beneath a hood, his footsteps light and purposeful. "Okoye, the guardian of the village," the man spoke, his voice dark but with an air of respect. "I come with warnings." Okoye's hand instinctively gripped his staff. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I'm called Mosey," the man said, lowering his hood. His eyes gleamed, and his features were sharp, almost too perfect to be real. "I am a traveler, but more than that, I come with news of the spirits." Okoye narrowed his eyes. "Spirits? You know of Nneka?" Mosey nodded. "I know more than you might believe. Okoye, the peace that you now enjoy comes at a cost. The balance may have been restored, but it is fragile. There are forces at work beyond your understanding, dark forces." Okoye's pulse quickened. "What do you mean? Nneka's sacrifice, it should have ended the curse." Mosey took a step closer. "Nneka did what was necessary, but there are others, spirits and beings from realms beyond who would seek to exploit this balance. What Nneka did may not be enough. The peace you cherish could unravel if you are not careful." The next day, Okoye met with Chief Ojinaike to discuss the mysterious visitor, Mosey. As much as he wanted to believe that peace had returned to the village for good, a deep unease gnawed at him. He could not ignore the warning about the forces beyond their control. "You believe him?" Ojinaike asked, his brow furrowed as he sat in the council hut. This man, Mosey, could be a wanderer, just another traveler with tales to tell. Okoye shook his head. "There's something about him, his eyes, his aura. It's like he's not entirely human. And what he said about the balance, it feels true. We've experienced peace, but I know there's always something lurking beneath it." The chief sighed, leaning back in his chair. "The spirits are capricious. They demand respect, but they also test us. We've been through enough trials to last a lifetime. But if Mosey's warning is to be believed, we need to be prepared. The village is still recovering from the curse." Nneka's sacrifice had not only freed them from the curse, but it had also paved the way for a new era. Yet, as Okoye watched the villagers go about their daily lives, he could sense that peace was not a permanent state. There were whispers on the wind, and the land was still too restless. "Where is Mosey now?" Ojinaike asked, breaking Okoye's thoughts. He laughed, but he told me that the danger was not immediate, however. The longer we ignore the imbalance, the stronger the dark forces would become. The chief stood, his face set in determination. "Then we must be vigilant. We will gather the elders and prepare the village. If Mosey speaks truth, we will need to act swiftly." That evening, a gathering of the elders took place. Okoye, along with Chief Ojinaike and the village's most respected leaders, convened at the central fire. The flames danced in the cool night air, casting shadows on their faces as they discussed the looming threat. "We have lived through the curse, we have paid the price, But I fear the peace we now know is fleeting, Okoye said, standing before the fire. A man named Mosey has warned me of dark forces beyond our control, forces that threaten the very balance that Nneka fought so hard to restore. Elder Amina, wise and calm despite the mounting tension, spoke up. And what of Nneka? Her spirit still watches over us. Surely, she will protect us from these forces. Okoye's eyes flickered to the ground. Her spirit is bound to the realm of the ancestors, but the balance of the living world and the spirit world is delicate. Even she cannot be everywhere at once. Chief Ojanike nodded. We must prepare for the worst. If Mosey speaks truth, we cannot afford to be complacent. The village elders agreed, and plans were set in motion to fortify the village and its defenses. They would strengthen the borders of their land, ensure that all knowledge of the spirits was preserved, and gather anyone with knowledge of the dark forces that Mosey had spoken of. As the meeting came to a close, Okoye could not shake the nagging feeling that something dark was on the horizon. The winds had shifted again, and with it, an unknown storm was brewing. The peace that the village had fought so hard to preserve was shattered one fateful night. The first sign of the encroaching darkness came in the form of a shadow that crept over the village like a blanket. It was a chilling presence, one that felt unnatural. The village woke to a chilling silence the next morning. No birds sang, and the wind had died down to a whisper. Okoye stood at the center of the village, his senses heightened. Something was wrong. As the villagers gathered in the square, they heard a distant cry, like the wail of a tortured soul. It echoed through the trees, reverberating in the very ground beneath their feet. Then, a shadow passed over the sky, a figure cloaked in darkness, blotting out the sun. There it is, Okoye muttered, his eyes narrowing. The darkness Mosey warned us about. The villagers scattered, seeking shelter and safety as the figure descended, its presence suffocating. It was no ordinary spirit. It was a being of malice, a creature born from the depths of the forgotten world. We must fight, Okoye shouted. Prepare yourselves, warriors. But it was too late. The darkness had come. The darkness descended upon the village like a storm, thick and oppressive, swallowing the light and leaving behind an unnatural chill. Okoye's heart pounded in his chest as he rallied the villagers to prepare for battle. This was no mere spirit. It was something ancient, something born of malice and hunger. The villagers, though frightened, gathered their weapons. Machetes, spears, and staffs were drawn as they lined up in defense. Okoye, though weary from the trials they had faced, stood tall, his staff in hand, ready to protect his people. But deep inside, he knew this would not be an ordinary fight. The creature hovered just above the ground, its form ever shifting, cloaked in shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Its eyes glowed with an eerie red light, and its body appeared to be made of writhing smoke, coiling and twisting like a living nightmare. It's a spirit of the forgotten, Okoye murmured to himself. A being of darkness that exists between worlds. We cannot fight it with mere weapons. Chief Ojanike, standing beside him, nodded gravely. We must rely on our knowledge of the spirits, the land, the ancestors. Only through them can we hope to combat this evil. The villagers formed a protective circle around the fire, chanting prayers to the ancestors and calling upon the spirits for strength. Okoye's heart raced as he focused on the ritual. He could feel the power of the ancestors, but it wasn't enough. The creature was too strong, too powerful. The beast let out a deafening roar, its body expanding, a terrifying shadow that threatened to swallow the entire village. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and a cold wind howled, tearing through the huts and sending the villagers scattering in fear. "We cannot hold it off for long," Okoye shouted. "We need help." But as if answering his call, a bright light appeared in the sky, sharp, radiant, and undeniable. The villagers looked up in awe as a figure descended from the heavens, shining like a star. It was Nneka's spirit, her form glowing with an ethereal light, her eyes full of determination. "Nneka!" Okoye cried out, his voice filled with relief. "You've come back." Nneka's spirit smiled at him, though her expression was tinged with sorrow. "I never truly left, Okoye. I am bound to this village, to the balance that must be maintained." The beast hissed, recoiling at Nneka's presence. Its form writhed in agony as the light of her spirit pushed back against the darkness. "Stay back, Okoye," Nneka commanded, her voice strong despite the power of the shadow. "This is my battle now." With a swift motion, she raised her hands, and a wave of light surged toward the beast. The creature howled in pain as the light tore through its form, burning away the shadows. But the creature was not vanquished. It fought back with a ferocity that stunned the villagers. Okoye stood at the ready, his staff gripped tightly, but he knew that Nneka's spirit was fighting a battle far beyond their understanding. The forces of darkness were ancient, their power rooted in realms no mortal could fathom. And yet, Nneka fought on, her light pushing back the beast, one step at a time. As Nneka's spirit clashed with the beast of shadows, the village was caught in the throes of a battle unlike any they had ever witnessed. The villagers could only watch in awe and fear as the two forces of the spirit world collided. The air crackled with raw energy, the earth trembling beneath their feet. Okoye and the others had no choice but to stand back, praying that Nneka's strength would be enough to hold off the creature. The beast's dark form writhed and twisted, attempting to engulf Nneka's light, but each time it was pushed back, its shadowy tendrils recoiling. It was as though the very air between the two forces was alive with the struggle for supremacy. "Nneka!" Okoye shouted, his voice hoarse with desperation. "You must not let it take you." Nneka's voice rang out with resolve. "I will not falter, Okoye. The balance must be preserved. The curse will not return, not while I stand." But even as she spoke, Okoye could see the toll it was taking on her. The light around her flickered and dimmed with every strike the beast made. The shadows clawed at her, threatening to pull her into their suffocating embrace. "We must help her," a villager cried out, his voice filled with fear. "We can't," Okoye shouted back. "This is a battle between the spirit world and the realm of the living. We cannot interfere. We must trust in Nneka." And yet, as Okoye watched the battle unfold, his heart clenched with doubt. Nneka had already sacrificed so much for them. Would this battle truly be the end of her? The creature let out another roar, this time with a force that sent a wave of darkness crashing through the village. The villagers staggered, struggling to stay on their feet as the air thickened with the creature's malevolent energy. Okoye fought to maintain his balance, his eyes never leaving Nneka's form. "Hold on, Nneka," Okoye whispered. "You are the guardian. You are our light." Nneka's spirit, though visibly weakening, managed to lift her hands one more time, summoning a final burst of radiant energy. The beast screeched as the light engulfed it, searing through its form, burning away the shadows that had long plagued the village. The battle raged on for what seemed like an eternity, but finally, with a final deafening roar, the beast was vanquished. Its dark form disintegrated into nothingness, leaving only the echoes of its torment behind. Nneka collapsed to her knees, her spirit flickering, her light dim but not extinguished. Okoye rushed to her side, kneeling before her. "You did it," he breathed, his voice filled with awe and relief. "You defeated it." Nneka smiled weakly, her voice faint. "The battle will never truly end. The balance is delicate, Okoye. But as long as the people of this village remember their ties to the spirits, the darkness will never return." With those final words, Nneka's spirit began to fade, her light slowly dissipating into the winds. But as she vanished into the night, Okoye knew that her legacy would live on. She had given everything to protect them, and now the village was truly free. The village stood in stunned silence, the echoes of the battle slowly fading into the stillness of the night. The once oppressive darkness had lifted, replaced by a calm that felt almost unnatural in its serenity. Okoye stood at the heart of the village, his gaze fixed on the space where Nneka's spirit had disappeared. The air was thick with both grief and gratitude. Nneka had saved them, but in doing so, she had given everything. The villagers began to stir, their expressions a mixture of awe, confusion, and sorrow. Chief Ojanike stepped forward, his eyes heavy with respect and mourning. "The spirits have shown us mercy," he said softly, his voice reverberating with the weight of their loss. "We are free, but at a great cost." Okoye nodded, his heart heavy with the realization that peace, though they had fought so hard for it, was never truly permanent. It required constant vigilance, constant remembrance of the spirits that protected them. The following days were a quiet reflection of the village's resilience. Okoye and the elders worked tirelessly, rebuilding the homes damaged by the battle. The crops in the fields were harvested with new vigor, and the village buzzed with a renewed sense of purpose. But even as the physical wounds healed, the emotional scars of Nneka's sacrifice lingered in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Okoye found himself in the village square, watching as the children played. Their laughter filled the air, a sound that was a reminder of the future they had been given. He knew that they had to ensure that future was one of peace, peace that honored the spirits, the ancestors, and the sacrifices made for them. "I never thought I would see this day," Elder Amina said, joining Okoye in the square. "A day when the darkness is gone, but now we must carry Nneka's legacy." Okoye nodded solemnly. "We will remember her, but we must also remember that the balance of the world is delicate. The darkness may have been vanquished, but it is always lurking, waiting for the moment of weakness." The elder sighed, her expression softening with wisdom. "Yes, Okoye, that is why we must teach the next generation. They must understand the spirits, the land, and the balance we have fought so hard to preserve." As the days passed, the village came together to honor Nneka. A great feast was held in her memory, and her name was spoken with reverence. Songs were sung, and dances were performed under the light of the full moon. Nneka's spirit may have left the physical realm, but her influence would be felt for generations to come. For Okoye, the journey was far from over. He understood now more than ever that leadership was not just about protecting the village. It was about preserving the wisdom of the ancestors and ensuring that the people remembered the fragile nature of the peace they had achieved. And as the stars filled the night sky, Okoye whispered a prayer to the spirits, thanking them for the gift of life and asking for the strength to continue guarding the village, just as Nneka had done. Several moons had passed since the battle with the shadow creature. The village, though thriving, was still haunted by the memory of the darkness that had once threatened to consume them. Okoye stood by the edge of the village, watching the wind move through the tall grass. The night was peaceful, but a feeling of unease lingered in the air. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him something was amiss. As he walked further from the village, the whispers began. The wind carried voices, faint and indistinct, but unmistakable in their cadence. They were not of the living, but of the spirits. Okoye had heard such whispers before, usually in times of great change or danger. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as the voices grew louder. They called his name, their tone urgent and insistent. Okoye's steps quickened, and he reached the edge of the forest, where the whispers seemed to grow even stronger. There, standing among the trees, was a figure. It was a woman, her form draped in a cloak of shadows, her face hidden beneath a veil. The figure beckoned him forward, and without thinking, Okoye followed. He had learned to trust the spirits, but this presence felt different, darker, more elusive. "Okoye," the figure said, her voice a soft murmur on the wind. "You have been chosen to protect the balance, but the forces you face are far older than you can comprehend." Okoye's heart raced. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, her form now clearer in the moonlight. She was not Nneka, nor was she any spirit Okoye recognized. Her eyes were dark pools of endless depth, and her presence seemed to suck the air from the space around them. "I am the keeper of the forgotten," she whispered. "The guardian of the ancient things that have been lost to time. You have fought the darkness, but the true battle is yet to come." Okoye's mind raced. The battle with the shadow beast had been intense, but this felt different. There was something far more sinister lurking on the horizon. "What do you want from me?" Okoye demanded, standing his ground despite the overwhelming presence of the figure. "I want you to listen," the figure replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are forces in this world that do not belong. They have been awakened, and they are coming for the village. If you do not act swiftly, your home will be lost." The wind howled around them, carrying with it a warning that chilled Okoye to his core. The battle they had fought may have been won, but the war was far from over. And this new threat, this forgotten force, was more dangerous than anything they had faced before. The figure before Okoye shifted, her presence still as unsettling as the creeping shadows of the night. The whispers of the wind seemed to gather, wrapping around him like a thick fog, urging him to listen, to understand. Okoye's pulse quickened as he struggled to make sense of her cryptic words. "You speak of forces that have been awakened," Okoye said, his voice steady despite the anxiety swirling within him. "What are they? What threat do they pose?" The figure's eyes darkened, and she took a step closer, her movements fluid like the wind itself. "They are the forgotten spirits, the ancient ones who were sealed away long ago. The darkness you faced, the creature that threatened your village, was only a harbinger, a signal of their return."